Hey all, I am in my file for the week 1 lab. I've got the name of my file up here on the Excel sheet, so week 1 lab, and my file has 2 tabs, Nolan and Nolan Financial, and these are the 2 data sets that we downloaded and saved in the last couple of videos. So just to give you a sense of what's going on here with Excel, I'm on a Mac. If you're on a PC, it might look a little bit different, but close enough. So here we go. At the top, it says week 1 lab. That's the name of the file. And we also have over here what's called the quick start toolbar. You can expand a full screen. If you're in a PC, that might be on the other side, but I can go home. I can save my file, save early, save often, or if I want to save it as something else, I can do save as. I also have undo and redo. Then below here, these tabs are what's called the Excel ribbon. And the ribbon contains a series of default tabs. It looks slightly different in the PC, but all the functionality is the same. It might just be located in another spot. And within each of these tabs, there are sets of related functions. The ones that we're going to pay most attention to today is the Home tab. And we've got this section here, which helps us change font and formatting. This is where we're going to add borders. This is where we're going to change our fill color. We have this section here where we can alternate or change where we want our alignment. Do we want our words at the bottom of the cell or the top? Do we want them aligned to the left, the middle, or the right? We can indent or unindent. We can choose whether to wrap text or have it stick out, and merge is another one we're going to use here. Also today, we're going to use functions from this section here, which is our number function. We've got a drop down where we can change the formatting of any of the numbers in our in our Excel workbook. And then there's some shortcuts. You can use this $sign to turn something into currency, or percent to change it into percent. You can add the comma to add commas in the thousands place, and then you can either increase or decrease the number of decimals. So that's our basic anatomy of Excel for today. And then let's just take a go with this particular file. So now we've got our Nolan Plastics is in the top left-hand corner. This is a spreadsheet model, and that upper left-hand corner, when you're dealing with an official spreadsheet model, that's always the name of the model, or the name of basically of the problem. And in this case, this model is, it's evaluating whether or not it's going to be more expensive for a company to produce something in-house, like make it themselves, or if it's going to be more expensive for them to purchase it from an outsourcing company who might make the product for them. And so we're going to basically do a break-even model to find out the quantity of goods that we're going to have to produce, that we're going to need to sell, that we're going to need for the cost of making them ourselves to equal the cost of outsourcing. Why? Because it's often nice to know, if we don't know exactly how many of our item we're going to sell, we can sometimes get a better idea if it's going to be more or less than a certain number. And then that can point us to the direction of whether we should make it ourselves or we should have someone else make it for us and then buy it. This is sometimes called the make versus buy problem, or make versus buy question, and it can be for not just your final product, but for almost anything along the lines in the supply chain. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do actually is a formatting thing. See how here in row 5, manufacturing variable unit per cost, the word unit is stretching out between column A and column B. That is just not going to work. So how you change that is you highlight the space between A and B and you double click. And it'll just make A as wide or narrow as it needs to be. You can also click and drag to make something manually wider or narrower. And if you know you want everything the same size, you can highlight them all and click and drag, and then now they'll all be the same size. Okay, so let's get started. In this spreadsheet model, the top section is called parameters, and this is pretty consistent across spreadsheet models. These are your givens. These are things that we are told. We call our people and we say, hey, people, this is Jamie from analytics or finance, and I need to know what my manufacturing fixed cost is. So the thing we're making is cell phone covers. And if we don't produce any, what are our fixed costs, right? The cost that we will still incur even if production is zero. So that might be rent, it might be insurance, it might be some basic costs of electricity just to keep the minimal lights on. And our person tells me $234,000. So $234,000 is our manufacturing fixed cost. And then I say, okay, thank you. Can you give me an idea of what our variable cost per unit is? Like, what does that mean in terms of cost of production for each unit? How much materials, how much direct labor? And person in manufacturing tells me $2. Great. So if we're going to make our cell phone covers ourselves, we're going to incur a fixed cost of $234,000 no matter what. And then on top of that, $2 per unit that we make. Great. So Jamie from finance here, I jump on the phone to my outsourcing partner and I say, hey, outsourcing partner, how much will it cost per unit for you to make these cell phone covers? And this is going to include tariffs and taxes and all those things, but valuable outsourcing partner says that it's going to be $3.50. So I enter 3.5. It changes to 4. So this is a moment where we're going to pause and just do a little bit of formatting. We're going to do a couple of things here. First is that all these things are currency. Those are dollars. $234,000, $2, $3.50. So I'm going to use this number section here, and I can either click in my number drop down and select currency, or I can just click the $ sign and select currency. You can also choose accounting instead of currency. I guess I tend to like accounting more than currency because it keeps the $ sign farther away from the numbers. Like currency to me, check it out, it looks a little crowded. What are those pound signs? That's $234,000. It shouldn't be a bunch of hashtags, right? Why is it? Well, and that's just Excel's way of saying that I've put too much in that cell. It's too narrow. So I've got to use my handy dandy double click on the space between B and C, and it will adjust. And now my whole $234,000 fits. Well, do I need these 2 decimal places? No, I don't. And here's a rule of thumb. You want to show as little as you need to tell the whole story, right? Why? Because people will spend mental energy making sense of things. And if it's not the thing that you really want them to spend their time thinking about, you're going to have a really hard time directing them to the conclusion you want them to get to. So in this case, I'm going to change this back to accounting, but $3.50, it is $3.50. We need that 50 cents, but here we don't need it. So I'm going to use the remove decimal button, decrease, and then I could increase if I needed to, but I don't need to. So we're going to decrease. Great. So now we've got our manufacturing fixed costs, our variable fixed cost per unit, variable cost per unit, and how much it's going to cost to outsource. Well, great. If you're looking down here, you can see where I'm going. I've got a spot for quantity. That's how many we're going to make, or buy, I guess, is the case if we outsource. And then once we have our quantity, we'll be able to calculate our total production costs. We'll be able to calculate our total cost of outsourcing by buying them from our outsourcing partner. And then here it says savings due to outsourcing. Let's change that to difference because we don't know if outsourcing is going to be cheaper or more expensive. So we'll calculate the difference. All right. Before we go, there's more formatting. I want to add a couple of colors. First, I want to click into this quantity box. This quantity it's technically in spreadsheet modeling, we call it our decision variable. It's the thing that's kind of under our control or the thing that might change that would influence our result. We're going to be plugging in numbers here, and we're going to change that number. We're going to play with that number to see how it changes our costs. So I want to color that gray. So up here, I've got my fill color icon in here next to font size. I can make font bigger, littler, bold, italic, underline, you get that. I'm just going to select a gray color. And here with my parameters are sort of customarily colored blue, but the thing is to just really be consistent. So I'm going to highlight all my parameters. So these I don't want to highlight all 4 of those cells because I don't want that one to be blue. I want this one to be blue, this one to be blue, and this one to be blue. The way to do it is to highlight the first 2, hold down Command or Control, and then click the other one. And then in your drop down, pick a blue. There you go. So great, now I've got my parameters in blue, my decision variable in gray, and then down here in the model, I'm going to have my cost to produce that I'm going to calculate, my cost to outsource that I'm going to calculate, and then I'll estimate the difference between them by subtracting one from the other. So our quantity, let's just say here that we are going to make 200 cell phone covers. I'm going to format that with this comma, and I'll remove the 2 decimals, so 200,000. It's a little easier for the eye to know that that's 200,000 and not 20,000 or 2 million if you put that comma in there. And so what's the cost to produce going to be? So if I'm going to produce them, I'm looking here at my manufacturing's fixed cost and my manufacturing variable cost per unit. So this says cost to produce, it could say cost to manufacture, but we're talking about the same thing. So our cost to make these ourselves is going to be $234,000, because even if we make none, that's what we're going to spend. And then we're going to add to that a cost of $2 per unit for each unit that we're making, or in this case, 200,000 units. Notice how I just clicked on the cells. So when I want to add B4, I just click on B4. B5, I just click on B5. When I want to include B11, so I'm not typing numbers, I'm only typing numbers once. Why? Well, it's handy because then if I realize, oh, I'm only going to produce 150,000 units, well, if I'm going to produce 1.5 million, as the case may be, my cost to produce updates automatically. And I'm just going to go Command Z to get myself back to my 200,000. So that's currency or accounting. Let's make that. So to make 200,000 units, my production cost would be $634,000. Well, what about outsourcing? How much is it going to cost me to contact our partner and say, can I please just get 200,000 of those? Okay. They will say, all right, including tariffs, shipping, taxes, etc. It's going to be $3.50 per unit. I click on cell B7, multiplied by, and that multiplication is shift over the number 8. It's just the asterisk, multiplied by the number of units that I'm going to make. So my cost to outsource is $700,000. So at a quantity of 200,000 units, are we better off making our product at home, making it ourselves, producing it ourselves? Or are we better having it done overseas if cost is the only thing we're concerned about? And if you said in this case, we're going to produce them ourselves because it's going to be cheaper to make them ourselves, you're right. In this case, the difference is $634,000 minus the cost of outsourcing. So it amounts to a $66,000 savings to produce ourselves. Should we then say, okay, yes, let's make them ourselves? You know, you're probably thinking yes, but I want to encourage you to say, well, not so fast, right? Because whether outsourcing or producing at home is better is going to depend on our quantity and how certain we are of that quantity. At 100,000 units, it becomes cheaper to outsource than it does to produce. And because all of these numbers are connected to these numbers and these numbers via formulas, any changes I make to the parameters or the model will change the subsequent numbers. So one of the things that comes up is wanting to know what our break-even quantity is, that middle magical quantity where producing and outsourcing costs the same. Then if it's higher than that quantity, you would want to produce, and if it's lower than that quantity, you'd want to outsource. So we can find that. Excel does that really, really easily. You could trial and error for an hour and a half, Or you could use Excel's function called goal seek. So goal seek can be found under the data tab. So if we click on data and we scroll all the way over to this little drop down button here that says what if analysis, and we click on the down arrow, we see goal seek. So goal seek will basically allow us to say, make the cost of production and outsourcing the same by changing the quantity. Find the quantity that makes those two the same. So goal seek pops up and it's got 3 commands or 3 things it wants from us. It wants us to set a cell to some value by changing another cell. So we want to set our difference cell to the value of 0 by changing the quantity we produce. Okay, so hold on, wait a minute. What are we doing? Why the value of 0? Because when that difference equals 0, it's because these two numbers are the same, because remember we calculated this as cost of production minus cost of outsourcing. So I'm going to hit OK. It's going to give me an update box just saying that it was goal seeking and it found a solution. The target value was 0 and its current value that's also 0. So what do we see here? We see at a quantity of 156,000 cell phone covers, we're basically indifferent between where we produce if cost is the only thing we're thinking about. And if we want to produce, if we think, okay, we're going to make more than 156,000, our costs of production are going to be lower than our cost of outsourcing. And if we think about why that is, it's just because when we produce, we have to overcome that fixed cost. All right. So the last formatting thing I want to do before we get into this is, since the difference here is our bottom line, I want to go back to the Home tab and just add some borders to that cell. I'm going to steal something from accounting. I want to use the top and double bottom border, just because that's my final answer, or my bottom line. So now that we've done this, right, what have we done? Being able to put it into Excel is fine. I mean, it's great. It's the first step if you can't do that, but it's really only half the battle. And the reason for that is that analytics is only useful if it helps us make better decisions. And in this case, we just learned something really valuable. If our break-even quantity is 156,000 units, and so if we think that our demand, if we think we can sell more than 156,000 of these units, we're going to be better off making them ourselves. And you can play with this number just to prove that to yourself. If I change this to 500,000, my cost of production is well below my cost of outsourcing. I'm going to Command Z to get out of that. And if I produce less than 100,000 units, let's say if I do 50,000 units, my cost of outsourcing is going to be much less. It's because we just aren't doing enough volume to compensate for the fact that it costs us $234,000 just to use that building. So now we know something valuable that we can report. So I want us to add a little text box over here that explains what we did. I want you to tell me what you did, right, which is a break-even analysis. I want you to tell me what it found out. It identified our break-even analysis at 156,000 units and what that means. It means basically that if we know our production quantity is going to be greater than 156,000 units, we should produce these ourselves because that will be the most cost-effective way to do it. If we think we're going to be needing to sell less than 156,000 of these, we're going to save money by outsourcing the production. So let's do that together. Insert. From the Insert tab on the ribbon, we hover over to find text box. And then we find our text box and we place it where we want to. We can adjust the size of this later. And we're going to type in an analysis. So our first question is, what did we do? And I want to insert numbered bullets. So bullets and numbering. What did we do? right? This is the what question. Our second question is the what did we learn question. Or also maybe what does this mean? What did we learn? What does it mean? Let's call it what does it mean, because that's what I did in class. And then the last question is how do we use it? So let's go up and address question number 1. Have to remove those bullets. So what did we do? We did a break-even analysis for Nolan Plastics, right? And you don't have to follow along exactly what I did. I think, using your own words is probably going to be more helpful, but and also I don't want you to use my words when you turn something in. Like, I know what my words are. I just want to see if you understand it, and I'm going through the process with you. And also, learning is the process of changing what's in your long-term memory, and adding something to your long-term memory will happen best if you use your own words. But I'll let you see what I do, and after doing this enough, maybe you type yours in, pause me, try to type it in yourself, and then see what I do. That's my suggestion. Pause and then start it after you've done. So what did we do? We did a break-even analysis for Nolan Plastics, comparing the costs of production with the costs of outsourcing cell phone covers. So what does it mean? Oh, I changed my numbering. Bullets and numbering. Start at 2. What does it mean? We learned that because of high fixed cost, we need to produce at least 156,000 units to make in-house manufacturing cost effective. How do we use it? This analysis tells us that for quantities below 156,000 units, we should outsource production. For quantities above 156,000 units, we should do the producing. We should manufacture the item ourselves, manufacture the cover ourselves. All right, we did it. That was the Nolan Plastics example. I don't know how long it took me, but that was fantastic. Nice work, team. I'll see you in the next video. I'm sorry, the Nolan Plastics example. I'll see you in the next video for the Nolan Financial example. Happy calculating.